most important part of our spirituality or our study is actually the practice. How does it convert into the dishwashing work that we do, or the scrubbing of floors, or the relating with those that we love most, or the raising of our children, or the coaxing of food from degraded soils, or navigating a world that is covered in pavement and plastic pollution every direction you look.
Ableman is a United Nations award-winning artist, best-selling author, rapper, and ecologist whose projects have touched millions, from MTV and HBO to planting 1 million trees in a single day. He's collaborated with legends like U2, Robert Grant, and Michael Beckwith, blending entertainment, ecology, and spirituality into what he calls revolutionary hope. Today, he stands on revolutionary hope inside of the spiritual debate. He says that the universe is a friendly place, that no matter the crime scene or crisis, a benevolent intelligence is always working behind the curtain to guide us into healing and growth. And I partially disagree, because I've seen the other side. The interference, the narcissist and toxic childhood, the false light, and the looks like love but leads you straight into illusion. To me, the universe is not just friendly, it's also a battleground. And so today, Aaron's theater meets my stage. The universe is friendly, but there's also thousands and thousands of years of vibrational warfare between nefarious beings and divine, angels, if you will. So is that a perspective that you have held, understood? And then based on that, what do we do?
We really do have to look at systems of control and power throughout history, right? Because history is not just a series of events, it's a series of worldviews and perceptions that have interpreted the universal energy in different ways. And it becomes very nuanced and dicey and scary and crazy when you start to look at how nefarious and downright evil some of the expressions of this universe have become.
Welcome, Aaron Ableman, to the Spiritual Debate Podcast.
Peace and blessings. It's an honor to be here.
It is so good to have you here today. This feels like a pure intuitive decision to have your presence in the podcast, and I think we are going to have an extraordinarily rich conversation. Yes, of course, the debate, I think it's going to be wonderful, but you feel like a kindred spirit. Like we've done cartwheels in other lives together and created art together. You feel like a kindred spiritual spirit that feels very similar to mine. So I'm excited to receive your medicine here today inside of the debate.
It's awesome. And I agree that we probably have been in different incarnations, dancing and singing and trying on different masks in the greater theater of life, as you say.
Well, like Aaron and Victoria, divine artists, it would be atypical of us to not start this podcast with a little bit of entertainment, if you will, except this time we're going to weave in a little bit more of our spirituality. And so Aaron has been thoughtful enough to invite us into a little bit of a prayer. And so we're going to begin today's debate with the art of Aaron Ableman. And so, Aaron, however you feel called to invite us into your medicine, we are available to receive.
So I want to just invite everybody into a sacred holy breath, to breathe in the best way that you can, slowing the breath through the nostrils, allowing somehow you to connect with the body and the present. As some say, the presence that is never an absence. And today we invoke this powerful energy of the universe, this quantum field, this life intelligence. Some call it God, others call it just the universe, whatever name that you have. Language in some ways does not encompass at all the deep wellspring of energetic beauty that we get to swim in, this yin and yang, this experience of consciousness out picturing and becoming planets, oceans, forests, concrete, emotions, all that is in the manifest universe is held by this consciousness. And what is this consciousness? Well, ultimately, that's anybody's guess, anybody's game, anybody's story to write. And so as we invoke this presence, we allow for our hearts and our minds to open in great thanksgiving, great gratitude, just for the ability to be thankful, to know that the truth is upon us in whatever and however you are in this moment, that you are enough, that your life matters, that you have some purpose that may surpass the current understanding, that all of the dramas and challenges that may be faced in this moment are somehow dissolved into this spiritual essence, this consciousness, this quantum physics of life. And again, we just sit in this, we dance in this, we invoke this presence so that we can somehow lift ourselves out of the 3D just for a moment to see ourselves as we are and to bless ourselves and to love ourselves truly fully so that we may actually be present for what it is that we're called to do in our lives. And for this and really so much more than words could ever say, I just release this prayer, this humble offering into the heart-mind fabric of the universe with an amen, ashe, so it is, this is true, the notion that we are surrendering to whatever comes next. And it's such a great joy to be in this space together.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You are like a word wizard. When you use the word wellspring, I was like, ooh, you know, you use certain words to invoke a level of emotion that I really relate to. I was a 15-year-old reading Shakespeare for context. So I love the way you use language. It makes so much sense, the body of work that you're creating in the world. And so thank you for your medicine. And now let's get into it. So, first question here, my friend. I want you to paint me a picture of your worldview. If you could give me a window into your brain to help me understand your worldview that the universe is a friendly place, let me in.
Well, I think the foundational premise for me is important really to name at the outset that I don't just believe, I know to be true that everything exists as energy and that this is energy vibrating at infinite frequencies, frequencies that go way beyond human understanding. There are these different scientific proofs of this energetic matrix, you could say, or field that we are all swimming in, as I alluded to in the prayer. But just this idea that from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy, from the words that we speak and to even the thoughts that we think, that all reality is frequency and energy. And it's not a metaphor, actually, that this is a law. So this is a part of like an original instruction. If you go to ancient wisdom traditions from around the world and the great mystics and the great interpreters of truth have all brought forth this foundational idea that the law of the universe is energetic, it's vibrating in infinite frequency forms, and that we, in essence, are expressing that in infinite ways. And it's sort of, to come back to the Shakespeare reference that you made, which is so perfect. It's like if Shakespeare had infinite years and no time and no limitations, what could Shakespeare have written? And we also now know with the Shakespeare debate and all of what's coming forward that Shakespeare may have actually been a subterfuge, which is even cooler because I love the idea of collective storytelling and collective work. And I think it's important to mention that each of us, as we express this infinite energy, whether that's dense and solid and stuck like a microphone, appears to be a microphone, but it's actually been structured in a way to condense energy into this geometric shape, right? And so it is out picturing as what we would appear to be, what we would think is solid, but actually it's really vibrating at a very slow rate in this particular shape and form that we call microphone. And so, and then there's the fast forms of more ethereal expressions of energy that may also, we can go down those rabbit holes, right, of how energy expresses. But I think it's really interesting to hold the thesis and the foundational notion that we actually, each of us gets to write the script and act in it and direct it and produce it and be the costume and the lighting, all the different parts of what we choose based on how we uniquely express our energy. And a lot of it is out of our control. It's epigenetics, right? It's what we've inherited, but also what we're then, what dominates in our habits and our lives, and whether we live a stressful life or whatever the constraints are, whether we grow up in a war zone. But ironically, coming back to your question, Ron, is this a friendly universe? Ironically, there is evidence for some of the greatest and most positive people in the history of humanity, at least, and throughout, like even you go into the oceans and you study nature and biology and the diamond, okay? Whether it's a diamond or Bob Marley, who grew up in the slums in Jamaica, or a diamond that was pressured over hundreds of thousands of years by coal that came together to create the most beautiful thing out of what was seen to be hardship. So it's not just a privileged gaslighting statement to say that the universe is friendly. I think the universe is maybe one step further. It is expression of the consciousness that expresses it, which sounds really basic. And it's like, well, what does that even mean? And explain that to a kid, but for me, it's really important to have these foundational ideas to sit on so that we can then choose how we want to express energy. And based on the choices that we make over time, we express friendliness or villain, friend or villain, shadow or light, fast or slow, these kind of dualistic forms that are part of a frequency range, even just the wave pattern, right, is going up and down constantly. So it does seem that duality and opposition are present. But the reason I say friendly is because even the dark needs the light. It's like the dark would not be the dark if it wasn't for the light. The light would not be the light, not the dark. They need to be friends. They are in dynamic relationship. And so maybe it's that the universe is in relationship that is a more refining response. I just choose to see it friendly because I know that the quantum model says that what we are looking for is what we're looking from. That's what actually St. Francis of Assisi said hundreds of years ago. So I think it's a really exciting thesis, especially when you look at just the existential crises that humanity's created for ourselves and the ways in which violence and control have proliferated our species. And each generation has these mystical yearnings, to express the friendliness of life, the intelligence, the wisdom of life. But it does require collaboration. It requires us to step into that knowing and to do our own inner work and to really shift the dynamic, hopefully.
So, to your point, there's an element of choice here, because we do live in a vibrational universe where, to your point, we do need both. We need the dark to understand the light, to empower the light, if you will. And we need the light in order to be able to also understand the darkness. It's like the saying, how do you know what you want until you know what you don't want? We put it in the context of relationships. How do we know what a life partner is until we experience different partners that are not the ones for life? How do we know what a healthy, benevolent relationship is until we know how our past has conditioned some of our more negative behaviors in relationships, and then what we ultimately want to choose? So there's an element of choice here from what I'm hearing in your language, that there is darkness and there is light, but they are, in many ways, to your opinion, in a sacred collaboration that we ultimately get to choose. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think that's accurate to what I'm proposing here. And I also really hope and work daily to prove that thesis. It's, to me, it's a working thesis, which is probably why when I heard the word spiritual debate, I was like, oh, that's an oxymoron, because it's like, for each of us in our own unique fingerprint, right? But and under unique perceptual lens. I wear these glasses today. I call them perspectacles, and I wonder about, is there an ultimate truth even at all? I don't know, but I think each of us does the best we can, given our own unique life experience, to come to a sense of bedrock foundational truth.
So, as an artist, then, as a rapper, and also as an ecologist, someone who, to your point about the diamond, literally sees what our actions have created in terms of an insurmountable amount of pressure. But how great art is created from that, how evolution comes from that, how, in many ways, I mean, I don't know any great artists that I'm obsessed with that are like, and then everything in my life was great, and then it kept getting better, and it kept getting great. It's like, I like when someone's like, and then my heart was shattered, and I didn't think I was going to come back from the dead, and then I did. It's like, we love the death, right? We love and relate to the hardship. And so now that I understand your worldview, I want to understand your walking view of this perspective in your life. How, as an artist who is in an industry of a lot of darkness, in the work that you do as an ecologist, somebody who sees probably deeper than I the state of the world at large, and your proactivity to try to make it a better place. Walk me through your walk view now that I know your worldview.
I love that. And I appreciate the question, because it's confronting, and it would be dishonest of me to say that every day is just clear and hopeful and somehow friendly. And I do think that I agree with some of the great teachers that the most important part of our spirituality or our study is actually the practice, is the integration, so-called, even though that word is now sort of thrown around. But just, how does it convert into the dishwashing work that we do, or the scrubbing of floors, or the relating with those that we love most, or the raising of our children, or the coaxing of food from degraded soils, or navigating a world that is covered in pavement and plastic pollution every direction you look. And I think it's interesting, because what I want to say to that, and this is my daily meditation in the morning and when I go to sleep, and I've put my daughter to bed uh, most of her nights. It's just been an extraordinary joy. She'll be 9 this year, and she, to me, is the most embodied version of my practice, my where all of my years and years of study, and going to the ends of the earth, and sitting in caves in the Himalayas, and serving in Haiti after the earthquake, or just all these like great experiences I've had, have all really condensed, I think, most profoundly in my role as a parent. And I think it's been the hardest and best simultaneous practice and role, so called, this experience of parenting. And yeah, it is absolutely a moment to moment choice about which wolf I'm feeding, which character I'm playing, you know, which of the ancestor voices I'm hearing loudest in that moment. Like, am I going into what my dad did in those moments? Or am I going into maybe the moments, like, am I going into the path of least resistance, or am I actually disrupting certain generational patterns to ultimately see the central power of love? And I think that word needs to be brought in. It's actually normally the first word that I invoke, this idea of agape love, which has been also popularized, but this idea that there is an unconditional loving expression to life that wants to live. It's basically just the idea that life wants to be. It just and it deserves to be. And so at a really foundational level, like if I come back to the central premise here of energy expressing as infinite forms of life, to me, love is the active ingredient that allows for life to continue and to evolve and to diversify and express in this great drama, this great, I call it a tragicomedy, of our journeys, right? And I was thinking about that. I was listening to a meditation from Muji the other day, who I've just been obsessed with. I actually was so fortunate to have sat in satsang with him long, like even before he became so famous, in Arunachala, and I was just like, who? And it was a small, intimate space, but he echoed something recently that he shared back then, which was just that there is a loving awareness that exists, whether or not you know it's there. And it's just up to each of us to awaken inside ourselves, to just give ourselves those breaths, those moments of response instead of reaction. So that's how it and then I'm seeing, like, yeah, when I'm in reactivity, my daughter can be crazy, and she's a mirror neuron for me. But the more I practice, the more I become able to be present for the hard moments with her. Because it is hard to raise a child, let alone raising a child during the sixth mass extinction, during a fascist government takeover, and during all these fallout of, and there's no village, and parents are kind of like, hey, there's no manual either because we don't have our grandparents around, or so there's all these challenges, and yet loving presence, loving awareness is always available to us. It's nearer than our breath.
I think that is a fantastic perspective. And I agree in that when sometimes we're so frustrated about a certain set of circumstances in our lives, if we can just catch that breath a few times and remind ourselves that there is wind with us that is directing us, then suddenly, ooh, right, I'm okay. Even in this moment, if I don't feel okay, I'm going to be okay. And I'll find out what that okay looks like when it's meant to be. But for now, so I resonate with that practice. And I think that allows us to walk through life with compassion, love, grace is a word I want to use. But I feel like there's another layer here. And it's one that I didn't understand for a very long time. I, as a very empathetic person, very, very, very sensitive light in the world, I often felt kind of raw in the world, if you will, because I felt everything all the time, even if I didn't want to, even if I tried to create boundaries around it, I would just absorb the world and never really know where I ended and my mother began, or where I ended and everything that was happening in the world began. And a lot of those meditative practices of love and compassion, of forgiveness, of observing really helped me. But then through a really big dark night of the soul, I guess, if you will, I started to learn about different forms of, if you will, nefarious extraterrestrials or nefarious different forms of demons or spirits. And these were not things that I had understood. I understood negativity, positivity. I understood with darkness, there is light. I understood all of that. And I also understood choice. Like, I can choose because what I focus on, like you said, the wolf you feed is the wolf that you eat. Like, I understood that. But then I understood this whole other different layer of this game, which I call spiritual warfare, where there is and are a lot of different nefarious beings. Should they potentially support the greater plan? Of course. But that doesn't change the truth of how a lot of these different beings are trying to intercept, maybe, the natural potential evolution of Earth, that are causing a lot of harm. And even if it is serving the greater plan, it doesn't change the fact that the majority of people are really struggling in today's day and age, right? It doesn't change anything to acknowledge what greater plan they are going to be a part of when right now my situation is as such. And so, two things I want to share here. One, I think it's important to disclaim this by saying I don't think that, we don't play a role in their creation and that we're not victims to it. So simultaneous, like, I don't think I'm a victim to the fact that there are these different nefarious agendas, maybe ruled by dark beings that don't have the love of God, choose not to have the love of God, let's say. And also that I'm not a victim to it. But I wonder if the nuance here and the deeper layer here is when we start to talk about different souls and spirits and life forms that are not wanting us to believe that the universe is friendly, to connect with this loving awareness, to remember that God is in our body, in our hearts, that source is within us. So that's where I think this nuance comes in between the universe is friendly, but there's also thousands and thousands of years of vibrational warfare between nefarious beings and divine, I guess, angels, if you will. So is that a perspective that you have held, understood, and then based on that, what do we do? How do we move forward with that information?
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you bringing this into the conversation, because we really do have to look at systems of control and power throughout history, right? Because history is not just a series of events, it's a series of worldviews and perceptions that have interpreted the universal energy in different ways. And it becomes very nuanced and dicey and scary and crazy when you start to look at how nefarious and downright evil some of the expressions of this universe have become. Yeah, somebody was saying that eternity, why is it so, why are there so many bad people, or why is there so many problems, or why we create our own extinction, or why have there been so much tumult and sinister behavior even just amongst humanity? And this person, I was trying to remember who said this, such a brilliant response, that essentially that eternity is a long time without a Netflix subscription, like that. Basically, like, we need this drama. The universe somehow loves to play with itself in every possible form. It wants to experience everything that it could possibly express. In a similar way, artists, we want to go to those sad heartbreak songs. We want to do the triumphant anthems. We want to do we want to write the Hamlets, and we also want to write the Midsummer Night Dreams. These are all parts of. Oh, it's so difficult. But I also was reminded that when you were sharing, in Tibetan Buddhism, which actually came later, because the historical Buddha, even though there's been many Buddhas, and Buddha just means awake or awakened, But when the Buddha first began to share of the Gautama, Siddhartha began to share of his awakening with not just India, but began to travel, and the teachings began to also travel further than even the teacher. It came to Tibet, and Tibet was actually a mostly shamanic, very like roof of the world, where they say all these intergalactic demon, like everyone's welcome from the whole universe in Tibet, because it's like this roof of the world, and vast ancient tradition that I could not even possibly summarize now. But there was this beautiful blending that happened when the great Padmasambhava, one of the great teachers of Buddhism, who also was unbelievable story, his life, brought Buddhism from India to Tibet. And in that mezcla, as they say in Mexico, that mixing of shamanism and Buddhism emerged what today is like, now the tradition of the Dalai Lama, who's now the 14th consecutive, and very much, you go to places like India or Tibet, and it's just very normal to see that not only do we reincarnate, but we have choice around reincarnation. We actually have like agency in these interdimensional realms, and there's just much more consciousness and awareness education around all of that, which I think the West could frankly use a lot of. And I'm grateful that master teachers have brought the wisdom of the East to the West at a time when it really, we've needed it. And so I also want to say that any of what I'm sharing is in large part inspired by those master teachers, from all, yeah. And I used to follow His Holiness around, and my parents met because of Yogananda. And so a lot of my life is colored by these traditions, although integrated uniquely into my ancestral work. And so that's a little bit of a side note, but to your point around why okay, so that's the point I was trying to make, was in Tibet, you had this incredible, almost like explosion, which was in some ways oppositional perspectives. Like the Buddha was teaching about the nature of suffering and how we transcend suffering by going inward and by studying the root causes of these samskaras, these patterns of trauma, and how we understand our own trauma by witnessing, but also still being fully invested. Just because we're witnessing ourselves doesn't mean that it's an active detachment. Anyway, that's Buddhism colliding with this ancient shamanism of the roof of the world, with all of the, with like, so much. And what came was a lot of demons, actually. So Padmasambhava was like conquering demons, and was then integrate, instead of like saying, you go, get out of here, no demons, like the exorcism kind of like approach, the fundamentalist approach. And, I have love for all peoples. I know we're all at our different levels of understanding, but what was so beautiful to me in seeing these beautiful Tanka paintings, in India, North India in particular, where there's the continuation, because basically the Dalai Lama fled China's invasion of Tibet, and, through this epic journey came to northern India, to Dharamsala, which has now become a haven for people all over the world that come to study sacred traditions and wisdom tradition from all over the world. But you'll go and you'll see everywhere. There's these master Tanka painters, and they depict these unbelievable scenes of like naked beasts making love with each other while chopping each other's heads off, and flames coming out of every orifice. And it's like, what is going on here? But each of those wrathful deities, they call them, are integrated and welcomed. That's a better word. That's like, no, all of it is welcome. All of it is an aspect of my collective self, and the part of me that's awakening to the greater universe, and my participation in it. I'm not some separate individual self that I need to fight to preserve forever, like, inject me or make me AI or send me to Mars so that I'm never impacted by the changing weather, the impermanence of life. No, I am the all. I am the compost, I'm the garden, both. And that's where I think there's something profound for each of us as we wrestle with our own demons and traumas and whatever we go through in life. It's like, no, that's actually a beautiful gift. Joseph Campbell said, where you stumble is where your treasure lies.
Hey there, it's me, V. So, as you can imagine, this is my first podcast. And so I'm learning all of these new ropes. And did you know how important ratings were? I didn't. I had absolutely no idea. And I'm so thankful for the support of my team for reminding me of how important having your ratings, your honest reflection of the podcast, how much that benefits us. So, I'm that annoying person in the middle of everyone else's episodes that I fast forward that hopefully you're listening to right now. And if you've got 30 seconds, it would mean the absolute world to us if you could take a moment and just rate this podcast, give it a thumbs up, share it with your bestie that you want to go head to head with, so we can continue to spread this message, debate about the truth, find what the truth is, and have the kinds of conversations that truly help us awaken in integrity. All right, back to the episode. I think you put a really beautiful spin when you said that we are both the compost and the garden, because I do agree with that in many ways, that the world that we see at large, there are aspects of our unconsciousness that have allowed, accepted, sense value in it in the same way. Little sidebar, I struggled a lot with addiction in my early teens, and the only thing that actually helped me now help others when it comes to addiction is accepting that it has value in my life. Whether that was positive value or not doesn't matter. Everything served in my mind at the time. I needed that in order to be able to thrive. I needed that in order to be able to unplug. I needed that in order to be able to process the world at large. And it was just not a positive value to my life, but it still served value. And so I agree with that, what we're seeing in the world with these very evil systems, they have value. They might be sick, they might be infested with parasites, they might be hard for us to reconcile with the fact that there's an aspect of us that still is looking for a savior. But regardless of how we're viewing it, it's still providing value. So I see that, and I think where I struggle when I teach psychic development now to a lot of amazing light workers who are on this awakening journey is that a lot of people are very under-resourced about this. We're resourced about love. We're resourced about loving awareness, about our reactions and our patterns. We understand that we are ascending and evolving. But if you tell somebody to be able to spot a demon in a room, they might say, fear is just an illusion. That's not real. Or further than that, it's a mirror of me, so might as well open the door. Or finally, that I wouldn't know the difference between my own negative thoughts and something else. And so I wonder, in the time that we're in, what worldview is more valuable for us to hold? Because this is what I wrestle with. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I feel it, and I get it in my cells. But then I look at 2025, in the state of the world that we're in, and I wonder what is more important, where we're going, or the fact that we don't have discernment in where we are. And we lack it in very significant ways. It's not something that's often spoken about, how to be able to discern the difference between good and evil, because if everything's all one, then nothing isn't. But is that really a fair thought to hold in a time where there is so much nefariousness? My personal stance on that is I don't know, Aaron. I don't know that I can hold that. I think that the more I understand the responsibility of being sharp in my discernment of what is the God that I believe is the loving, organic, almighty creator of everything that is, the more that I hold that and also understand that there are beings that have used their free will to separate from that and sharpen my discernment, I feel like I'm a better, I don't want to say advocate because that's not the right word, but I can be of greater service in the time that we're in right now. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Wow. Yeah, that is, I think that's the work of our time, actually. And that's not for anyone to define for another
Yeah.
ultimately. But I think that you're equipping us and the collective with tools,
Mm.
with a toolkit in terms of how to navigate those very real questions, because they can be make or break when it comes to mental health. When I mean, everybody says the mental health is the real pandemic, and this notion of opening the toolbox to reclaim our inner sovereignty, to actually have even just the discernment to say, oh, this is my expression of life, and I'm going to look deeply into what that really is and who I really am. And it may be that you come out with more questions than you started with, you know, or that you actually come to some sense of deeper fortitude in these kind of perennial truths that we're wrestling with here. And I think that's a very noble use of our time. I'm not even putting it on a hierarchy of how you use your time either, because I know that that's very personal for each of our own unique journey and karma or dharma or whatever you want to say about it. But from my standpoint, I think that one of the best uses of my time has been to really go deep within me, to go as deep as I possibly can, knowing that I often fail, knowing that it's hard to look at some parts of myself or even parts of my family constellation that I feel could have done better, or whatever the judgments are, I think are less important than my ability to just witness and be present to this search within. Yeah, and it is a search in many ways, even though ironically, it's actually the one thing that's just always there. There's nothing to search for, because it's so there are these contradictions in the process of discovering one's sense of one's sense of purpose and value, which I think inherently we're all valuable and we all inherently have purpose because of the nature of interconnection. And even just like the quantum entanglement thing tripped me out. Every time I read about it, I'm like, what is even going? The universe is just way beyond smarter than me, even though I'm the universe, right? So it just how interconnected this is, and that's something I want to, as a point of encouragement around this willingness to look at your shadow and to do that shadow work of, and sometimes there are many ways of doing it, right? The toolkits that you're bringing, the ceremonies, the ancestral work, like uncovering where did you come from? What is your lineage? Can you find some folks in your lineage that had something inspiring to you? Can you even just contextually, that is like a vast study there, connecting to nature, connecting to the arts, connecting to spirit in whatever way feels most authentic to you. The form is less important of how you discover and explore yourself. But what is important here is shifting the finger from pointing outward to inward, right? It's not what you're pointing at, it's who's pointing actually.
Yes.
And so that's really, and that's empowering. Imagine if every single one of us, 8.5 billion of us or whatever, just somehow had that reminder on our phone when we wake up and we go to sleep or throughout the day, like, you are the answer, or whatever it is, like just an encouragement to shift the focus from external to internal.
Yes.
That would be a tremendous transformation, because if every one of us does a little bit, then that amounts to a collective transformation. It's not going to take a few of us doing a lot, even though that's happening. But the more of us that reach this critical mass of just coming into harmony with yourselves, just coming into, oh, wow, I have a gift in me. And just that idea of like, I'm going to discover that gift and I'm going to give it.
So we want to go inward as deep as we possibly can to find the pearl in the oyster, essentially, is what I'm hearing from what you're saying here. That regardless of what it looks like, what it actually is, and what is ultimate, inward is what will allow us to be able to outwardly impact the macro in a benevolent way. And that's the goal, right? We're here to help the world in this grand theater, this grand spiritual warfare theater, and everything in between. We're here to serve, to take the pearl that has been given in the depth of the lessons of our lives, in the practices that we've learned, that the tools that we've been guided to be able to offer that to others.
Yeah. You said pearl. That's another great example. See, nature proves the point every time that in the pearl, it's this rubbing of sand, and it's like this kind of long sand rubbing that's pretty intense, apparently, for the oyster to actually create the most magnificent crystalline magic of the sea called a pearl. And that's such a great, and it's another metaphor that I think does prove my thesis, if I could say, that the universe is friendly. It's not easy, and it's not gonna not be hard, and it's not gonna like just be some kind of cakewalk, and you're not gonna face everything from, oh God, complete heartbreak to genocide to the collapse of ecosystems to, fire and brimstone, all the wrathful deities. And yet in the pearl of each of us, you said so beautifully, I think that is really that the pearl exists in our own suffering, and by way of relating to the suffering, not from a place of like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, even though those are natural first responses. I'm not saying you have to survive. You got to like protect yourself, stay safe, do what you have to do. But if we can come just for these moments until it becomes a way of life, to see our struggle as beautiful.
See our struggle as beautiful. That is a worldview that I can absolutely stand by. And what I love about the Spiritual Debate podcast is that I feel like we end up finding where ultimately there's the agreeability point. And the more podcasts I've done, the more that I feel in some ways that I sound like this like eternal pessimist in comparison to some of the guests, because a lot of you hold the same, I guess, projection, if you will. You hold the projection of this universe has a grand plan, and all of it holds significance. All of it is meant to be. All of it is as it's intended to be. And I sense that I've had just window into a nuance that every day I'm learning more and more about. Like, why did God give me this nuance to be able to see demonic activity, to be able to see how hard some people's lives become, how far they become from who they naturally were because of different forms of nefariousness, how what I call interference, some people might call karma, that regurgitation, incarnations of negative information where souls are trying to break free. As an energy healer, I see those deeper webs like this. It's like, yes, we want this projection, but some souls are like this, caught, and they're going to they're going to die from this physical reality and then reincarnate in the same lesson once and again and once and again. But hey, to your point here, the curtain goes down, but then it comes back up and it's all just one big, one big benevolent, loving, crazy, quirky theater show.
The quarks are quirky. Yeah, the theater game, the theater as a metaphor and as a reality is so helpful sometimes, because it does give us that, just these moments of perspective.
Yes.
And probably that's why the popularity of podcasting and all these different formats of media and communication has really democratized our ability to bring in that nuance that you're talking about.
Yes.
I think it's not, yeah. So esoteric schools have long taught that it's to raise your consciousness, you raise your frequency. But that doesn't just mean becoming positive and love and light. That's not what this is about. It's about coming into, like, refining the perception so that we come into just kind of clearing the noise of the unconscious patterning and tuning ourselves like an instrument. And actually, the instrument is ourselves, but consciousness is the tuner. So we're in that music of life. And that's another classic metaphor here, which I think is profound, that just because a piece of music is beautiful doesn't mean it doesn't have minor chords, or there may not be out of sync rhythms. There might be things that even sound weird and bad, but that doesn't mean that we X them out of the orchestra.
Right.
We have to integrate those and say, oh, wow, we're singing this is a bigger song than it's just a bigger song. And the song keeps getting bigger and bigger in a way. And also maybe more and more personal to each of us, as hopefully over the course of generations, collective liberation is achieved in a way that is useful and ultimately triumphant for the universe and this energy expression that we all are. I don't know what the grand scheme is. We can't know that, but it's great to play music along the way together.
Taking time to find what harmony is, and respecting that everyone is on their unique journey to, one, learn what kind of instrument they are, and then two, how that instrument plays and how to tune it and how to refine it and how to integrate it as one with you. And then from there, how do we play in the greater orchestra that is life? So then my last question for you here is, well, who's the conductor then?
That's the $1 million question, I guess. I think it's a both and for me. It's each of us uniquely. It's me, and it's also everyone I ever meet and everyone that I don't meet. And so this notion of the conductor as more so a dynamic reflection of the orchestra, as opposed to like, here's the music that you need, that I'm gonna teach you, and you do this, and we're playing in whatever 6/4 time in the key of E flat, and this is what it's gonna be. It's like, oh, this is what the orchestra is playing. Okay, let me add my bit in there, and then we hear some calls and responses, and then we kind of refine our song. Maybe we're constantly composing. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's like, it's a both and. It's the orchestra and the orchestrator. It's the game and the gamer. It's the writer and the player. It's the ball and it's the team. Oh, it's it's Ronaldo and it's and Portugal together. Like, whatever the different form is. But I like that better, because I think that's just helped me orient myself. My mom growing up, she always, said, "You're nobody greater, nobody less than,"
Mm.
and yet we are all so unique, and we all are greater and less
Yes.
than. So there is a paradox
Hmm.
happening, but it's a paradox rooted in collaboration and love. If I could put a bow on this exploration, this conversation with you, it really is rooted in love and collaboration and participation. We have to participate. That seems to be, even when we're not participating, we are participating.
Would it be fair to say, then, that we are experiencing divine theater in its cosmic hilarity, and also it may appear on Earth presently like there is the perception, anyway, of some form of spiritual warfare? Or would you just simply say all of this is divine theater? The perception of spiritual warfare is, again, nothing but cosmic hilarity, and everything is really just a show.
That's something for each of us to, again, I don't know if I have the
Mm,
answers in some of these core questions. I think I'm also asking
yes.
that same question with you. But it's a great one, actually. And I'll probably spend the next, at least this lifetime, trying to answer it.
Well, you and me both. So, I want to share a little bit with you about this little gift that I had. So, I have a niece. She is 3 years old right now. Her name is August. And it's funny, you might look at this gift and be like, is that your daughter? Are you sure that that's your niece? We are like spitting images of each other when I was a little girl, but I wanted to get one of your books for my niece. And so I have a little video and I'll let you give it a listen. But it is my niece and my amazing sister, Julia Pipo. But I wanted you to have this gift from us.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna click play.
Okay.
What? I've not seen this.
Pacha's pajamas. It was one of those days, warm and balmy, the perfect day for a nap, if only it wasn't a school day. Pacha sat under the only tree in her schoolyard, reading a book about a strange animal called a platypus. The egg-laying, duck-billed, beaver-tailed, otter-footed mammal was unlike anything Pacha had ever imagined. She wanted to learn everything she could about platypuses before lunch was over. Next period, Pacha had to give a report on this crazy creature. She was nervous talking in front of the whole class, but figured if she really knew her stuff, she'd get through it. Yet Pacha was having a hard time focusing. The heat rising off of the concrete made her eyes droopy and her thoughts mushy. She drifted into a daydream about meeting a platypus at the end of the river. Look, there's a platypus. The platypus told her no matter who you are, you must use what you got to bring your dreams to life. He said his dream... Please don't touch. Okay. He said his dream was to keep the rivers cool. He didn't want his family... Your hair was in my mouth. It's okay. The bell rang. Pacha woke up and hurried back to her classroom. The ice caps are melting, she told the class, and the rivers and oceans are heating up, which is making life hard for platypuses and other animals. Where's the platypus?
Right there. Her classmates looked puzzled. Pacha decided to try something else. Have you ever thought... Oh, this is good. Have you ever thought about what it would be like to live in a world without ice cream? That doesn't make any sense, her classmate Erin said, and everyone laughed. Pacha was embarrassed, yet something inside her had awakened her, a force of nature beyond words.
Oh, wow. That definitely made my day.
So she's a little young for the book, but My sister had such a fantastic time. The second one is just a photo if you wanted to have it. I wanted you to see a picture of my niece and my sister, and they're holding it. And they were looking for all the mushrooms in the book. And she's a brilliant girl. And I wanted to be able to show you just how much your work is inspiring people. And how my niece, who is on her awakening journey, she doesn't know it, we're going to keep her awake in this lifetime. Just how amazing it is having an extraordinary person like yourself doing the good work to help the younger generations stay awake and aware. And so that was just a little gift from my sister, my niece, and I as just a thank you. A thank you for being here. A thank you for your worldview, but also for your walk view in the world, your service in every way, whether that be through your art, through your efforts in the world, planting 1 million trees in a day. That's crazy. All of your ecology efforts, but also all of your service in your heart, offering that to the world. So thank you.
It's been such an honor to be here, and likewise reflecting the gratitude right back that, yeah, we can take this deep, beautiful, rich exploration of life and its truths into the creations and services and offerings and communities that we touch in our very unique and precious lives that we live.
Well, amen to that. Amen to that. So, to end this episode, we are going to leave it with our guests and our extraordinary listeners of the Spiritual Debate podcast. Question for you. Do you believe that the universe is just divine theater, or is it spiritual warfare? Let us know.